David Brister here with an episode of Chordplay, and this is Chord Construction Frequently Asked Questions, or FAQ. And I've actually had a lot of people leave comments and requests and send messages related to chord construction and chord terminology, and really kind of helping, understand, you know, ninths and flat ninths and sharp 11s and 13ths and stuff like that, because this is very complicated. And I know for myself, I was very confused by this for a long time. And then it finally just kind of clicked, and then it made sense. And I thought, oh my gosh, it was like fumbling around like in a dark room. And then somebody finally turned on a light and I could see, everything. So, really your study of chords and chord construction can go on for years. So I can't really guarantee like one, 15-minute lesson is going to help you. Like, maybe the lights aren't going to be turned on, but at least you'll have like a better idea of how chords are named and how you can locate chords. So really this lesson is just going to be like glorified chord search. And we're going to talk about chords and extensions and slash chords and all kinds of stuff. So here we go. One thing that will really help you kind of give like a mental, visual of what we're doing is you need to think of something. You need to kind of, keep something in your mind and kind of, remember as we move along. So if you're familiar with like a piano keyboard, definitely, the piano is very visual and you can actually see, notes that you're changing or adding or removing, from chords. So that's a really, a really nice visual. But I'm guessing some of you watching this maybe have never, touched a piano. Maybe you've seen one, maybe you haven't seen one, maybe you don't even know what a piano is. I'm joking, of course, but, piano is a nice visual. Another way you can think of this is think of like an abacus, like an ancient, calculator with like the little beads that you kind of move along, and it gives you kind of a visual display, for mathematics. And even the old, bead or rock game, Mancala, from Africa. That's a game where you basically move, stones or little beads around this wooden board. And it's kind of a visual game, like you kind of see your progress and whether you're winning or losing, depending on what's in front of you on that little wooden board. So you can kind of think of it like that. Here's an image to kind of help you understand what Mancala and an abacus actually are. So that mental kind of picture in your mind of either, a piano keyboard, the game, the ancient calculator, the abacus, um, something like that, you should try to keep in mind as you move forward, because it's really easy to get lost. It's really easy to get turned around. We're literally going to take a chord and then start mutating and changing it. And when you start changing something, it's really easy to get confused because you know where you're starting, but then you may get lost somewhere before you, arrive or end somewhere. So it's really common to kind of, dive in the chord construction pool and then you feel like you're going to drown because there's so much information. You change one note, it radically changes the name of the chord and the sound. So it's really easy to see why this is so confusing and it's hard to learn and it's frustrating. And, there's so many little rules and things you have to kind of remember. And it's like, okay, if I have a seventh, I can do this. And if I don't have a seventh, I do that. And, so it is tricky. And before we really dive in here, I'm going to share one more story just to kind of start this in a totally different mindset for some of you. When I was in Atlanta at AIM, my theory teacher, Randy Hillickster, we were talking about chords and chord construction, and he looked at, basically a group of guitar students. I think there might have been a couple drummers, maybe a bass player in there, but basically the whole class were, guitarists. And he looked at us and he said, okay, so what are the two most important notes of a chord? Everybody put their hand up. I had my hand up. And he, called on somebody and they said the root and the fifth. And he looked at him and he said, that's wrong. And then the whole class put their hand down and everybody looked at each other like, what? And, it wasn't me that said, the root and the fifth, but that's what I was going to say. And, my mind just started melting in my brain. And I thought, what do you mean the root and the fifth, aren't the most important? And to my world, that was the most important. It's a power chord, root and fifth. And I sat there and I thought, you know, the root and the fifth aren't important. I thought, okay, well, I have no idea. And then he basically admitted that the third and the seventh are technically the most important notes of a chord. You know, the third dictates whether it's major or minor, and then the seventh will dictate whether it's major seven, you know, or dominant seven. So, you know, typically when you play in a band, the bass player or another guitarist or a keyboard player, they're going to be playing the root. So you can leave the root out. I mean, you can definitely play it, and everybody does. But you don't have to necessarily play the root unless you're playing, you know, solo guitar or like a, you know, guitar duo or something like that. Then you might need to, you know, make sure that root's in there. But if with a full band, like a 5 or 6 piece band, somebody in the group's playing the root. So you can actually, you know, find some other things to play. And then the fifth is also important. You know, it's a very strong tone. But it's not really essential, you know, to dictate or establish, you know, a tonality or a sound. It's nowhere near as, you know, influential as, say, the third or the seventh. So think about that as we, you know, start wandering around the fretboard. And for some of you out there, you might be like, what? You know, just like I was. But it's true. The third and the seventh are technically the most important notes of a chord. The first thing we're going to do here, we're going to target the key of A minor, and I'm basically regrettably putting this in A minor, and I'm regretting it simply because this is always shown either in C major or A minor, which are relative keys, you know, relative major and minor. But I chose A minor just to keep it very simple. You know, the key of A minor has no sharps or flats. That gives us a really common, you know, common ground or an easy place to start from. Because, you know, if we don't have any sharps or flats and then we start adding and changing things, you're going to notice it right away where it's like, well, hey, there's a flat or there's a sharp, you know, and then you'll recognize, you know, what you changed. So from the chromatic connection scales and tails episode, I had some charts that I kind of flashed up on the screen, and I'm going to flash those again really quick here. So here's an A minor scale, like an A natural minor or Aeolian. There you can see just regular note names, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Right? Now we're at a chromatic scale, and you can see at the bottom I've just, you know, numbered them off 1 through 12. You know, chromatic scales are very, very common, especially, you know, dealing with chord construction and scale construction. You can definitely use chromatics to help you kind of see, you know, what your options are and what notes you have. Finally, if we alter the numbers at the bottom, you know, instead of 1 through 12, if we relate those to intervals, you know, minor second, major second, minor third, major third, and so on, that's actually going to show you like the steps, whether we're building a scale, we're building a chord, an arpeggio, and that's actually going to help you see, like, you know, where a, you know, a flat 2 or a flat 9 comes from, or, you know, raised fifth or a flat 5 or a flat 6, which is also a flat 13. But here's a chart kind of helping you see the possibilities here. So if you look at that chart, you'll see, you know, the natural minor scale is still there, and then the notes that are listed in red are additional notes, you know, or extensions or outside notes. And you know, some people look at that and they think, okay, those are the notes that I never want to play. But when I see that, I think, okay, those are the notes that I could, you know, include. I could use it as a passing tone. I could, you know, just kind of wander out of key or kind of move, you know, maybe toward a different key and imply something else by grabbing, you know, one of those notes. And with chords, it's no different. You know, if you grab one of those notes and kind of stick it in a basic, you know, minor or major triad, it's going to change the way that chord sounds. And I'm sure some of you out there have seen charts like this, where it's everything, you know, listed as far as chords by type, major, minor, and dominant. And while that's a pretty complete list, there are some other chords that aren't listed there. Tetrachords, and there's a whole bunch of stuff, you know, we can talk about. But to get things started here, like I said, we're going to basically pinpoint the key of A minor. And the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to grab an A minor chord, okay? And I chose the good old-fashioned, you know, Stairway to Heaven chord, which, you know, a lot of you probably have seen or already, you know this chord, which is why I chose that one. But right there you can see we've got the open A, there's the A on the 7th fret on the D, there's C on the 5th fret on the G, there's E on the 5th fret on the B, and then another A on the 5th fret on the high E. So, you know, we're basically playing 5 strings, but we're really only playing 3 different notes, A, C, and E. We just happen to have, you know, 3 A's stacked in that chord just to kind of fill out the sound and give it, you know, kind of a bigger, you know, a bigger tone or a bigger sound. Okay, so that's basically an A minor chord or A minor triad. And you can actually see it right there, you know, right in the middle. So there's A minor. So before we start moving around, there is a really useful chord that we've talked about before in Chordplay. So right there, if we take that A and move it up to a B, you know, right there on the 9th fret on the D string, then that's going to change that to an A minor add 9. Which I really like the sound of add 9 chords. And you can see with add 9, that B is basically the 2nd, but the 2nd is also known as a 9th. And since the chord has a minor 3rd, that C right there, that's why they call it add 9. Because we're playing an A minor chord and we've added the 9th, which is B. Okay, now we could add, you know, the flat 9 right there. You know, that's really ugly. There's A minor again. Now if we lower that A basically to a G sharp right there, or A flat, but we're going to think of that as G sharp. You know, it's an A minor major 7 now, because now we've added the major 7th, that G sharp. You know, really ugly. And if we lower that another half step to G natural, now we're just playing an A minor 7. And then if we lower that G down to an F sharp, now it's an A minor 6. So right there you've got this very common kind of Latin or Santana approved, right? A little descending, you know, that descending note there on the D string, you know, has a very signature kind of recognizable sound. Now if we keep going, you know, that was the F sharp there with the minor 6. Now if we lower that to F natural, and that becomes an A flat 13 or a flat 6. Because in music theory, chord construction, and scale construction, you know, a 6th is also a 13th. It just depends on, you know, how it's being used. And if we lower that F down to E, now we're back to A minor again right there. So we really just, you know, took the stock, you know, A minor fingering we started with and just found all these little variations, right? There's A minor, right? So what happens if we add the C note right here on the A string and we're taking away that open A string that we've been using? So we keep everything else the same, but we change that lowest note, and then that's going to become a slash chord. So that's A minor over C, or, you know, basically A minor over C, or it's, you know, an A minor slash chord because now C is the lowest note. And we can change that C to a B, so now it's A minor over B. Right? And that's where slash chords come from. You're basically changing, you know, the lowest note of the chord. Now that we've kind of uncovered, you know, that concept and we move down, you know, the D string, targeted notes, you know, on the A string there. Now let's do the same thing, but let's do it on the G string and see what happens. And, you know, if you're familiar with the Abacus, you know, just think of kind of sliding one of those beads, around the metal post. And that's kind of what we're doing with notes, on the fretboard. We're kind of moving and smearing these notes around. So we're not going to worry about this E note here on the 9th fret, because we already have that note right here on the 5th fret on the B string. So there's A minor, and then we add, E flat right here, which we could also think of that as a D sharp, and that would be a sharp 11. So there's an A minor sharp 11, which I love those chords. Like, that sounds like, something you hear Al Di Meola or maybe Randy Rhoads or someone play. Really cool sound. Move the D sharp to D, and then you're playing an A sus4. Move the D to a C sharp, and now you're playing A major. Change that C to C sharp, and you changed it to a major chord. Lower the C sharp to C, and now we're back to A minor. Now if we lower that C down to a B, the fingering's going to get a little funky. That would be an A sus2. And then if we lower that B to a B flat, there's another, mystery chord. That would be an A5 flat 9, which, the flat 9 is basically that B flat. Really spicy chord too. I like that. And now if we continue this process, and now we're going to move along the B string, and we're going to keep, the rest of that chord the same. So here, we've got the A here on the 5th fret on the high E string, and that note also lives on the 10th fret on the B. So we're not going to worry about the A, but let's figure out, this G sharp right here. Let's see what happens there. So that would be A minor major 7 again, which we did spot that back here. But now that G sharp is on, a higher string, or it's a higher note now. Okay, really spooky chord. I like that. And then if we move that down to just a regular G, now we're playing A minor 7. And I'm a big fan of that chord too. I like that. That voicing, is really cool. Move the G back to an F sharp, and now you're playing an A minor 6. And then you move that back to, basically F natural or E sharp, technically. And that would be an A sharp 5. So we could think of that as a flat 6, which would be F, and you can also think of that as a sharp 5 or augmented, and that would be E sharp. And I know that note actually came up in the Buckethead, 3-for-all that I did recently, and I was talking about augmented, arpeggios, and in the key of A minor, when you change to A augmented, you are playing E sharp. So even though, in kind of basic music theory books and courses and classes, they teach you, that B sharp and C flat don't exist, but they technically do in certain situations. I just want to throw that out here. But right there you can see, and you can think of that as an A minor sharp 5 or an A minor flat 6. Or flat 13, I guess. Now if you lower that back to E, we're back at A minor again. If you lower that to E flat, then we suddenly have an A diminished chord. And if you lower that to D, then you're playing an A minor at 11, which I definitely love that chord. Okay, to wrap this look at some chord construction approaches here, let's move to the high E string and do the same thing. So we can start with A minor, and then if I grab the 8th fret here on the high E and grab that C note, it's still A minor. It's just a different voicing, right? Now if you move that C back to a B, then it's an A minor at 9 suddenly. Definitely love that chord. And then A minor flat 9, if you move it back here to B flat, kind of ugly. And then there's A minor again. And then if you move that A back to a G sharp, that's going to be an A minor major 7 again. mysterious chord. Move that G sharp to a G, and then you're basically playing A minor 7. So as you can see, I took one chord, this A minor, Stairway to Heaven chord, and I basically moved around the D string, I moved around the G, I moved around the B, and the high E, and I found a whole bunch of A minor based chords, or chords in the A family, I guess. Anyway, this is just kind of a brief kind of introduction to chord construction and kind of understanding some of this. And there's 100 or thousands of different ways you could attack this and approach it. This is just one suggestion or idea, but I don't really see a lot of people talking about this in this way out there. And that's why I chose to show this first, because it seems like there's a lot of confusion surrounding, hey, what happens when I change this note or that note? And as you can see, a lot happens, So anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content material. Thank you.